And I wonder if you would like to start with a poem.
Sure, it's great to be here, Mary, and it's really nice to see you. And I see loads of familiar faces, which is it's very moving to see. And thank you for being here. I'm going to read a poem from my last book, which was The Big Calls. Which those of you who know it know that it's some pretty targeted poetry upon recent examples of calamitous happenings in England and beyond, with the sort of the people who run our lives somewhat in the crosshairs, and all to the rhythms of ancient indestructible poems from the canon and published by Life Canon. There you go. So this is called Last. This is not about a specific incident, although I suppose it's haunted by various terrible events that happened in the last 5 years in which the Metropolitan Police played a role. I'll just leave it at that. And it's obviously it's based on Browning's Last Duchess, and it has the form and length of Last Duchess, so it's in basically rhyming pentametrical rhyming couplets, and it's about it's the voice of a man who I sort of took the Duke in My Last Duchess, who is basically confessing, as you know from if you know the poem, basically confessing to murdering his wife. This is really flipped into an ordinary man who's so ordinary he wants you to think he's involved in everything, but he's involved in nothing at all. But there's something about the way he speaks that perhaps is a key to... Well, I'll leave it there, ... Last. A murder wall is the wall you see in a lot of popular entertainment with a lot of strings and picked photographs of women who are dead and suspects. That's a murder wall. That's my last murder on the murder wall. Not mine, I stress, except in that it's all mine. The case was mine, though I have since moved on. It's my display, the sheets and pins, the local cuttings, strings from clue to clue, spaces on my wall for all these new leads and hunches. For they come by night, they do. I blink awake by the bedside light, then I battle to assemble that last dream. Soon I'm smiling in the kettle's steam, a wise connection made in the small hours. No, not the least decline in the old powers, I'll assure my former colleagues. It's the case we never should have closed. Her amber face gleams in the dead centre of my wall, attractive, at a do, so shy, quite tall, holding a drink she hasn't touched yet. Cheers, I softly say, and lift my mug. It's years since all of this. Follow the dark green twine east of her picture to the railway line, where someone saw her walk. Black marker pens point to a capture from a dirty lens down by the paper's edge. Her friend, his dog. Follow the red thread west to a house in fog. Why did she go where she went? Why did she do the things she did? I know you, I want to say, but that way madness lies. Take it from me. I look in the bluebell eyes. One day her prince will come. Does the station call? Do they hell? Dare say their murder wall lies flat in some wide oaken drawer these days. I see it sliding out of view. Her face is pale, alarmed. My case is closed? But why? You never solved it. Angel, so say I, as I loop a silver string around a tack and add a question mark. Did she go back? Don't go back, I whisper, and my pen rings a pencil sketch I made back then, as best I could, but not a pretty sight. I stir my oatmeal as the early light outlines the window. In one dream we meet. I give her warnings. Then I walk the street patrolling for the lady. In one dream I'm leaping through the station to my team to stop the drawer from sliding out of view forever, just in time. I tell them who and how and why, and no one moves at all. My lady rises from my murder wall, and then I wake. I didn't take this case, or any case, or worked in the police, or knew the lady, or the pictures here. I don't wish I'd done it, let me make that clear. But in some dreams I'm known of, have a name that comes up in the briefings, in the frame, person of interest, sort of. My files lie underground on shelves that go for miles.
That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Glyn. I love the poems in the big calls with a brilliant combination of political events and using some of the old traditional forms, as you say, from the canon. And I thought, I mean, I've now decided to rejig what I'm doing and ask you something about performance in poetry, because I noticed that at the forwards, they have introduced a new category for performance poetry. And I love Bodrum Piasecki's poem then, and I was at Outspoken on Thursday and heard Joel Taylor. So it makes me wonder, what is your opinion on the relationship between performance and poetry? Where is the dividing line? I remember once you said all poetry is a sort of dramatic monologue. Can you say something more about this?
I suppose because I've just read something based on just about the most famous dramatic monologue in the canon, I should say something about that first. What I mean by that, I suppose, is that is your poem is never you, never your voice. You know, you're exploded into a new universe of language, and it's not the real life that we experience. So it's a dramatic monologue in that you have to create it from scratch, from the language. No one, you know, apart from the people who know you, no one knows you, right? So you have to create it from scratch. That's why you have to be so damn good to do it well. So that's why I think every poem is a dramatic monologue. And you know, if you don't know the person who's reading, then they can't fall back on saying, well, that's what I'm like. That's what happened to me. You know, it doesn't work like that. We're judging it by, is that coherent? Is that coherent human presence? On the performance thing, I think about this a lot. I think it's good that's been taken seriously. You know, I don't take the prize business seriously. I mean, of course, it has to exist for various reasons, but I don't think much of it. I'm glad if they're going to have it, they've added a performance element to it. I sort of feel that even the finest performance poetry will have to arrive at some consensus on the page if it's going to last the generations. If it's going to last beyond its age, beyond its time, there has to be some consensus of what that looks like on the page. So I think the skills kind of that I teach, to be honest, the things I care about in craft matter the same. I mean, I don't teach stuff like, you know, how to act. I don't have the chops with that, but like how to present, I wouldn't teach a course on that, although I got some suspicions about how to do it. But I think some of the truths that govern between words and white space on the page are the same truths that govern between sound and silence in performance. I'd put it like that.
Yeah, for sure. And you also say somewhere that that every line is a breath, so it feels very bodily when, you know, in the reading and in the crafting of poetry. But there was something that you taught us on the MA, which I think was one of the most powerful moments, is when you got us to act out our poems. I think you got in some actors to do this. And so it was adding a whole new dimension to the poetry. And I wonder, is this something you do mentally with your own poems when you're crafting them?
No, I wouldn't do it so deliberately as that. Most of what I teach about poetry is sort of retrospective. It's like saying, here's this works and that works. So what can you feed into your practice that would help you? I don't think you should I think lots of things about how to write poems, and they change every year. But I don't think you should, shore all that stuff up against writing anything. Otherwise, you wouldn't write anything. I've stopped writing. I write so much about how you should write a poem, and I just stopped. I mean, I'm taking a break, but it can seem like a lot to do. I think the thing with bringing the actors in and the theatre directors, that's the summer school, which I think you're referring to. I do that because I think it's good for people of whatever age, but people who are at the point where they want to take an MA. So like you were, and lots of people here were, or are, or will be, or have been. That it's a good point to take it into the other dimension of actors who may not know what people who may not know what you mean. So and try to make a sort of tableau of it, try to make a 3D thing of it. In the exercise you're talking about, I look at a poem of yours or whoever's involved, and I've got a bunch of people who are going to present the tableau or act it, and I just think, well, it could be that, it could be that, it could look like that, and as much as it's about the aesthetics of writing the craft stuff and the aesthetics about writing a poem, it's also about the out there in the world stuff. It's about actually losing control of what you wrote, because anyone who starts to get plays put on, anyone who starts to get things adapted, anyone who's dead, frankly, has lost control of that, right? So I sort of feel it's good practice to lose control of that, and so I love that day. It's my favorite day in the sort of teaching calendar. I think poets are terrified of it. The poets in the group are usually terrified of it, and they end up really liking it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but on the whole, it's an exhilarating sort of day. But that's why I do that.
Okay, no, it certainly was. It was a bit dramatic to have to wait till you're dead. But anyway, I gather your love of the stage also came from your mother, who was an actress and director, and that you used to put on plays at home. And so I also heard on a Simon Armitage podcast, when he gave you a choice of stage over page, you chose stage. So did the love of stage come before poetry?
It probably did. Yes, because my mother, was an actress, and so it was sort of in the blood, and my dad loved theatre as well. I think I said that because when I applied to be a graduate student in writing, I applied to work with Derek Walcott in Boston many years ago. I applied as everything. I applied as a poet and a novelist and a playwright, and I just thought, I really want to go there. I've never been to America. I really want to go there. I really want to work with him, whoever he is. He wasn't very famous then. Well, he was, but I was very lazy, so I didn't know who he was. And I got taken on as a poet and playwright. And I don't think my poetry particularly fitted in with what was going on anywhere, but my theatre stuff sure didn't. I was writing, Marlowe knockoffs. I was writing real kind of pentametrical verse plays. That's how I started in theatre, and that's not the highway to riches, in case anyone is curious. But poetry sort of happened first for me. But I think the first love was theatre. I think if I had to choose between the two. No, I think because I suppose because it's more communal. There's more people in it, and I used to think I used to think in a very social way, like theatre life's more fun than poetry life because it's more communal. There's more people around. But actually, I've discovered that it's about equal. There's a lot of people around if you know where to look. So.
That's really interesting. I noticed that I was going to ask you about going to read drama and poetry with Derek Walcott, because I gather you had actually started an MPhil at Oxford or something, and then you dropped out. Yeah. Is that right? I wondered what made you choose America over England, or why was it just not that satisfactory for you, or what was it that the America MA, the US MA could give you that the English one couldn't?
Well, it wasn't remotely to do with the quality of the education on offer. I mean, the main reason, the main thing was I wanted to go to America. I'd never been, and that was true regardless of the fact that, you know, suddenly I had an offer from BU because Walcott liked my submission. So, you know, that became obviously where I was going to go. It was. I was doing I was applying for an MLit on false pretenses.
Okay.
You know, I'd done 3 years at Oxford, and then I'd gone somewhere else for a year, and then when I came back, I just really wanted to write. I wanted to write. That's all I wanted to do. And I thought if I did a graduate degree, I would have lots of time to write. So I go to see this high-powered academic somewhere to have a one-to-one interview about. You know, I didn't even know really what I wanted to study. I just something that I thought would be fun. Like I think it was something Jacobean. And I walked home from there with an enormous reading list, and I just thought, I can't do this. I can't do this. I don't really want to do this. I just want to write. And my dad's helped me out with the fee, and I have to pay that back. But beyond that, I mean, look, I don't know what anyone's politics are, but I'm just saying the fact is I was able to spend a year in Oxford on the dole, which, you know, if you remember what that was, writing and becoming better at that. And then I decided to apply to American colleges. I think so many of those outwardly scuzzy looking decisions that young people make have been taken away.
Yeah,
You know, in the arts.
Yeah, so true. So, but I mean, it's interesting you wanted to go to America. Was it just because of the glamour of America, or was there something about the writing and because you're not that sort of praising of contemporary American poetry or contemporary poetry generally, or that was my understanding. So I wonder what it was that was drawing you to it.
You said it. It was just because of the glamour of America.
Fair enough.
Look, I'd never been there. I'd never been there, and it was exciting to me to go to this. You know, anyone, I think, who grows up in the English language, people there are all sorts of reasons to find America entirely distasteful, or you can't really tar a whole country by its leaders. Imagine what people would think of Britain. So, you know, I wanted to go there because it's the sort of dream of an English speaker, because it expands into space, expands into dream. What happened to English? What happened to, you know, it's all our best and worst qualities are on display there, and of many European countries. But we started it, you know, or we think we started it. So it really was. It wasn't at all about the literature course, and the fact that I ended up studying with Walcott was just a fantastic chance. You know, he had a book called The Fortunate Traveller, and, you know, man was I the fortunate traveller. I applied to 40 places. I got replies from about 5, and I got a very enthusiastic reply from South Carolina. You know, and I dodged a bullet there.
Isn't that where Kwame Dawes teaches? I think South
Oh,
Carolina.
it might be. Look, every one of those. I'm not taking a piss out of redneck states. Every one of those redneck states has an oasis of proper liberal, progressive concern and work. Yes, so there's all sorts of terrific writers everywhere. Every state's got one of those. But of course, Massachusetts had loads of them. And Boston replied to me and said, "Mr. Walcott likes your submission and is But I didn't know who he was because I just didn't know who that was. But they were very excited about it.
Yeah, he obviously became a really important figure for you. I mean, I noticed that you're among the people he's dedicated white egrets to. I think so. And I think you said that he was the one who got you to start writing plays and also to read Auden. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so I was also, I mean, that takes me to another recent book of yours, which I love, How the Hell Are You? which is, I find, I mean, I really enjoy it, but it seems it came out, I think, was it 2020? And it feels, some of it feels quite dark. A lot of it's about time passing. So much time is mentioned again and again. And I noticed that it follows the death of Derek Walcott and possibly your father. And it seems as if there might be quite a lot of personal grief in there. So I might be reading things into it, but I just wonder, how easy is it for you to write yourself into a poem like that? You know,
I think I hadn't done much of that. There's in the book before How the Hell Are You is called Pluto, which is sort of 7 years earlier, and that became quite personal. I thought it was time to stop dancing, stop dancing around relationships and how they made me feel, but actually sort of talk about them a little bit, relationships that come and go and so on. And How the Hell Are You has quite a lot of that in it. And then, of course, because of the natural process of time, two of my elders passed within 6 months. Roughly, if you're looking for sort of poetic balance, my father passed on the autumn equinox of 2016, and Derek on the spring equinox of 17, more or less. So that's quite a lot to lose. Neither that unexpected, but they're very old. But it's quite a lot to lose, like back to back, I suppose. And I think as a poet, I didn't want to shirk that. I wasn't going to shirk addressing that.
Absolutely. And so I'm interested that you were saying, yeah, there's a lot in Pluto. It's true that which predates it. That's quite personal. I think that Ted Hughes also came to a point at a certain stage of his career of just wanting to actually just put more of his stuff out there. But I wonder if generally you have an audience in mind when you write, and whether you belong to groups or you ever workshop your stuff, or is it quite a solitary thing, unlike playwriting?
It's quite a solitary thing, unlike playwriting. I like the communal aspect of theatre very much. It means a lot to me, and I think that's where its fire is. I think that's what builds. With poetry now, so in the year with Walcott, which was the late 80s in Boston, his class wasn't a workshop. He didn't believe in that sort of thing. His class was seminars. So it was a lecture. It was 2 hours on Monday morning. It was terrifying. And I kind of say that in the poem. But then we had George Starbuck, who was a contemporary of Anne Sexton, who was a partner of Anne Sexton for a while. The thing about BU is that it had its history of. They say that in the brochure. We go to the bar at the Ritz, and Lowell used to be here, and Plath was here, and Anne Sexton was here, and George Starbuck was here. So when I was there, George Starbuck was still there, and he did a workshop. I mean, you guys from the poetry school, why do you think I want to go to the Lyceum? I want us to be in the brochure. I think we're trying to make some history here. Anyway, that was BU's way of thinking about it. So George had a workshop. So the same group I was in to be lectured to by Derek we had a workshop, and I haven't done a workshop since. And in an unguarded moment, I told the year, who are now the second years at the school, that they could workshop one of my poems, and I never stopped regretting saying that. I do mean it. If any of you are there, but I haven't got one. I haven't got one you can workshop for. I will one day, because I did say it. No, I've been asked to become part of workshops, and look, I've taught plenty of people. Plenty of people are present on this call who are really singular, who have a really distinct style, a really unusual style, and you sort of think you don't want to submit them to workshops because you want them to just plough their weird furrow and so on, because that's what they should do. But I suppose I've been a little bit like I'm way too out there now to be able to cope with the workshop, because I don't. And I know, look, Mary, it's kind of dumb. I know it's dumb. I think really what it comes down to is actually to do with my personality. I think it's hard for me to expose myself to that. because I mean, in this writing journey, you can have fantastic confidence in what you do, and suddenly it can crumble to real fragility about it. You all know that. There's a lot of people here who know that. I can see you.
Absolutely.
So I'm not in a hurry to have my poems workshopped anywhere. I haven't since 1988. That's what I can say.
So the dividing line between trusting your intuition and getting a response is actually, I just trust my intuition, right?
I suppose so. I'm in a very strange place with poetry right now because obviously I'm very much immersed in it because of teaching at the poetry school. So I'm looking at it from you guys, students, all the time, and thinking about it all the time. But thinking about it very much like how's that work on a page? Is that the right form for this person? Are they doing what they should be doing on the material they're looking at? So there's all that. But in terms of those of you who study with me will know that I'm not terribly well versed on the contemporary, and I tend to know all the kind of old stuff a bit better. But that's okay. That's my practice really.
Yeah.
But I haven't. I mean, the big calls was absolutely the most deliberately outward looking stuff I've ever done. It's all really public, really outward. It's like taking those forms from Tennyson and Kipling and Browning and so on, and basically saying to the people who've been running the show,
Yeah.
even these are the kind of poems that people like when they don't like any other poems. Who hate all the 20th century stuff, right? These are those kind of poems.
Yeah.
And it's like saying to, if you've read the book, you'll know that I encountered Mr. Johnson years ago. And it's like saying, well, Mr. Johnson, even the poets you like think you're wrong, think this is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that. I mean, this is silly kind of sci-fi speculation, but I think rugged Kipling would think this government was abhorrent, and that's saying something.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it was, I remember you saying once, at least I think I heard you say, that there aren't enough political poems, and I think it's an incredibly brave and brilliant book. So, I mean, if anyone hasn't read it out there, get it, because it really is good. And it's a really powerful one. So can I just ask then, from all the things you're saying, if you could sum it up in a sentence, what is poetry to you?
As soon as you said, if you could sum it up in a sentence, ... I knew that was a terrible question on its way. Not a terrible question, a good question, but a frightening one. And I've forgotten what it was now. What is poetry to me? I think because of, I suppose what I was saying, like I wrote all those public poems, which in a way were easy to write because I was working on a frame. I knew what they had to sound. I knew where the beats and the rhymes had to go, and I knew what I was angry about. But I haven't written a personal poem for a long time, really, and I know I want to. When I finish the book I'm writing on Substack, which is me talking about everything I know, so that I'm talking about everything I know on my Substack book, Silly Games to Save the World, so that after New Year's, I'll be really quiet because I have nothing else to say. And that's, I suppose, when you go back and see what's left in poetry for me. And I'm scared of that. I'm kind of scared of that. I don't know what it will be. I think I think the form will be different in some way. So what is poetry to me? Well, I remember, this is a bit name droppy, but it's good. Joseph Brodsky talking about Walcott, he'd say Walcott would get up incredibly early. Walcott always, he lived in St. Lucia. He could always hear the sea the whole time. And he'd get up incredibly early, kind of like I do when I get, 5 a.m. He's sitting in the sound of the sea, by the view of the sea, and it's almost like, and Brodsky's describing him sort of like bent, crumpled over his book, his notebook, and he's just sort of gradually sort of coming to life as he writes, sort of like bringing himself to life. And I remember Brodsky saying it was like, it is a function of the organism. It is a function of the organism. That's a absolute born poet who can do nothing but that to get through life. And I think it hasn't always been poetry for me. I obviously I got through a year without writing a single poem, which feels strange, but I feel it'll be there. And I'm hoping it's a function of my organism. But at the moment, to me it's been about the philosophy and psychology and looking out and trying to figure out what on earth's happening.
Absolutely.
That's been.
No, that's beautifully put. And I was going to say that, I mean, you were talking about earlier about how you well, in the big calls you're using some of the old, the canon, the traditional forms, but I wonder, have you invented any forms yourself, or do you invent them and just quietly sort of get on with it? I'm thinking of people like Julia Copus with her specular poem, and George Surtees says he invents forms like the 3 haikus followed by 1 line, and Jericho Brown's duplex, and Terence Hayes' golden shovel. Has Glyn Maxwell got any particular forms he's invented?
Yeah, I got plenty of forms I invented. I love poets who invent forms. I really do. I mean, all the ones that we know, the ancient ones, someone invented them, right? It's the same procedure. Somebody thought of the pantoum, somebody thought of the sonnet, somebody thought of the haiku. We don't know who it was and how it came about. Some of the sort of modern ones that everyone's trying, I like more than others. Some of them, for example, I mean, I'm always happy to see poets who I'm teaching try their hand at any kind of poetry form, because it's good. It's good to try it. It's good to put up obstacles against yourself. Yeah. But it's sometimes with some of them, it's hard to see what situations is this right for. Yeah. What situations is this right for? I mean, it's just natural, but it's always a good exercise. I find it. I don't know about golden shovels, because I think you're always left with some terrible line breaks because it's in the nature of the form. You know. So I'm not sure about that one. I'm not sure about Sestinas, but I've got no one to write to about that because I don't know who came up with that one. But I still think they're worth trying. Yeah, no, I always anyone who I've taught will know that in recent times I give you lots of horrible questions, and one of them is to say, if you could only write in one form for the rest of your writing life, what would it be?
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah. But I asked that question, and then I think, well, then I back it up by saying, well, Emily Dickinson did that, right? It's not such a sci-fi question. Emily Dickinson did that because that was her form. She just wanted to write in that shape. And I tend to admit to it sounds like fetishistic and weird, but I tend to admit to a preference for 2 long lines and a short line. I don't know what that's called, but I've written in that a lot with sort of roving rhymes and so on. I love Terza Rima. I think Terza Rima is heavenly, and I don't even believe in heaven, but I think Terza Rima is heavenly. It's a fantastic form, and of course, personally, I did it to death in Times Full 20 years ago.
I was going to ask you
10,000 lines in it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because that was made into a film, I think, and you also used it to create the libretti for Wagner's Flying Dutchman. So I just wonder what it was like.
No, objection, Your Honour. Objection, Your Honour.
I wonder what it was like.
It has not been made into a film.
Okay.
No, Mary.
I thought it was.
For 2 objections, Your Honour.
Okay.
No, I'll tell you what. Times Full has been bought by Fox Searchlight. They optioned it, and then years later they bought it. And then there was a writer's strike, and I'm still just waiting around. And that's Hollywood, right? You don't expect anything to happen. But and I've seen the script, and it's like bears no resemblance at all to what I wrote. It's completely unrecognizable. But it would still represent, at the moment, all it represents to me is a massive tax bill. But maybe one day it will represent something more.
How about
so that's. Yeah, no, I didn't know, and I know what you're confusing. The thing is that with the Wagner, because Times Full was an encounter with the Flying Dutchman. Times Full is based on the Flying Dutchman, so that Times Full is entirely in Terza Rima, and because it was Dante's form. I thought it would be right for my sort of suburban train-based version of the Flying Dutchman. So I went for it. I wasn't long out of Walcott's class, and I was absolutely reckless in terms of what I might choose to do. But the recent libretto I did for Flying Dutchman, for the away from Timesful, was that was like a honest libretto work. That was dropping new English words into where his Wagner's German is.
Okay. So I know that you're not that you don't have much time for music lyrics, for song lyrics. But does your libretto become sort of quite musical when you write it? I mean, because music, everything you do is musical.
This is getting really like LA Law, because I'm going to have to pull you up on that. No, I mean, I think what you mean is that all I said in On Poetry about song lyrics is it was different from poetry. That's all I ever meant. It was different. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because poetry is written on silence and song lyrics are written on music, and the greatest song lyrics, when you hear them with the music, stand up there. The greatest songs stand right up there with the best poems of the last 2 centuries, and there's no doubt about it. I adore the likes of Dylan and Tom Waits and so on. That stuff. I mean, I just love it. But it's a different art form. It just seems to me it's a different art form. That's all. It's like sculpture and painting. I mean, they just seem to be really radically different things. So
Yet there is something about the musicality of language itself that seems to be really important in poetry. So, I mean, within that, accepting that they are different art forms, I mean, I just sort of wonder, do you start, I remember another exercise you did was to get us to write a line and then sort of answer the next line somehow, so that it would be in a similar musical style somehow. And also it was just making me wonder whether we're always trying to get back to a language which we loved, even when it didn't make sense to us, perhaps, right even before birth, who knows?
I would agree with that. I think that is what we're trying to get back to. And I think the connection with musicality and poetry is really important, because actually musicality in poetry is fine if you're writing poems, but if you're writing libretti or theatre, on the whole, you have to pull that back. You have to withhold that. It took me a long time to learn that in theatre. Is that I went into theatre thinking what theatre needs is beauty, lyric grace, and that's what I do. That's what I do. So I'll bring some of that, and it's nonsense. What matters in the poetry of a scene in theatre isn't to do with the language. It's to do with the situation. It's to do with your basic. He knows, she knows that, but she doesn't know that, and he wants something else. And it's the poetry is in the situation. It's in the characters, I think. Mm. So, and definitely with libretto. And I there's not a lot of poets who write libretti, but there's some. It's easy to see when it goes wrong, where the poet's trying to bring their more sort of poetic self to it. In fact, you have to leach out all of that when you can't do metaphors and simile particularly unless they're really clear and really basic. In libretto, you can't, because there's no time. And I work with companies who can't afford subtitles, so no one can hear what I said anyway. No one knows what I'm saying anyway. So I'm just got a personal beef there going on, but. Go on.
Okay, so that's right. Well, just a last question, because we're going to have to wind up shortly so that we can have time for Q&A. But I just wonder, because you're also a judge quite often in poetry competitions, if you could give us a little tiny insight into what it's like, the experience, and what you look for, and how you go about judging.
Yeah, it's like. By the way, did you win in the Bridport?
Sorry, did I read in it?
Did you win a prize in the Bridport?
Yeah, I was highly commended in the Bridport. Yeah,
that was the first one I ever did.
Wow.
And in those days, I couldn't, no one was filtering for me. I got sent a box with 7,000 poems in it to my home in Welwyn Garden City. And I remember thinking, look, first of all, congratulations for that, because the Bridport is enormous. I mean, it's enormous then. And I just thought, wow, those guys are making some money here. That was impressive. It's very simple with prizes. I read a poem. It's like, did I just meet someone? It's like you're at a very, very, very big business conference. You're at a very, very big conference in your dream in some NEC or whatever. Who do you remember? Do I remember that one? Do I remember that one? I can even dislike poems. I think, well, I remember it. That goes into the next round, But the early stages of poetry judging, a lot of you will have done it. It's like the traffic light system. I love the ones I love, and I love the ones I hate. The bastards are the amber ones.
Yeah.
The amber ones, because you have to stick around with them for ages trying to figure out if they're good or not. But the green and the red are very helpful.
Manitz Alvi told me that Pascal Petit used to refer to them as gas mark II poems.
Fair enough.
So, okay, I wonder if you would treat us to another poem, and then we'll do the Q&A, if that works for you, whether from the big calls or anything of your choice.
It absolutely works for me, and anyone who knows what day it is and knows me will know what I'm going to read. I'm going to read my elegy for my father, which is called Daylight Saving, obviously because that just happened in the morning. And I'm very, very, very fond of daylight saving. And I was, I wrote this probably about 3 years after he died, but I was looking I knew I had to write an elegy, and I couldn't think of how to do it until this came along. And I just thought there's something holy about suddenly you have a dark evening, suddenly you have a light evening. And I know it's all artificial and we just shift the clock around, but that's a hell of a thing. It's like, it matters that we can do that. And everyone always says, let's get rid of daylight saving. Well, it's in the poem, but I said, never get rid of it, because it's like, it's unearthly for it to be a certain o'clock and dark, surprisingly dark or surprisingly light. I love that, and it made me think of my father. So all I need to say about this poem is that Sib is the pet name we had for him. And the other thing is that he died in 2016. So the reference to voting late in the poem is about the Brexit vote. Okay. All right, so I'll read this. Daylight Saving for Glyn Maxwell. Sib, they're considering doing away with daylight saving. I wanted to tell you, in one of the fora we wandered together, neither one literally here. Anyway, I don't know the reason. The folks of the morning and folks of the evening met at a table, and at the same moment rose in agreement, doing away with daylight saving. And nor was I there to say, hold your horses, as you would have said, and so would your father. 3 in a line having doubts at the same time wasn't to be. No one sat in our places. No one spoke up for the scent of the hedges, our marathon hide and seek going on when the sun should be set and we shouldn't be out. And the ribbon of light down the curtains for ages, infinite really, in that there's no ending, anyone showed me. No one spoke up for the thrill of the way the last shreds of a Sunday clung at the gate like a father was coming to ferry them home. All gone if you looked, but you were gone too. No, Sib, they are thinking of doing away with daylight saving. Won't miss the beetling advance of the dark on your boys standing up in our bikes, heading home. They won't miss the witches just missing the trees when it's not even 5. For whatever they save, they will lose as they do. It's not going to be time. Who knows why they had daylight saving at all? I'm just glad we had it. I'm sure you explained. You're explaining now. And I'm listening how I have generally listened and always will, for the love in a sound. They are doing away with daylight saving. And where shall we meet? Now God, I don't think so, is shutting those windows and locking the lot like a yesterday. We shall meet where the light and the clock are askew, and the language has scrambled to say what that's like, and it's thinking it might let the space play the light, but it might let the space play the other thing too. What was it called? Went round in a ring, and it pointed to there, and it pointed to there. There was its point. Who knows where it went? Howls the language again and goes back to its darning. As back to St. Francis we go, you and I, where we voted that second last time you went out. Won't say how that went. There'll be time better spent and light better shed to go wandering by.
Thank you, Glyn. That was really, really beautiful. I think now we have got the possibility of opening the floor to questions. Leslie, have you got any?
Yes. Quickly before that, I'd just like to really thank Glyn for such extraordinary exposition on these different aspects of writing and performance and teaching and judging, and a real sense of this sort of unique combination of the serendipity and deep commitment working
Thank
together.
you, Leslie. Thank you.
I haven't expressed my thanks yet, but thank you.
I was just say that. But also, if anybody has a question, if you could pop it in the chat, and I will pick out a couple of questions that we can ask to Glyn. If you have something you'd like to ask, if there are any questions, see if we have anybody. I have a question. Can I ask my question quickly? It's a question about pamphlets, actually, because when I first started reading, or I studied literature, I was writing, I had absolutely no concept of pamphlets, that they even existed, that they were a thing. They were never, T.S. Eliot never wrote a pamphlet, sort of, do you know what I mean? And in the people that you study or read, there was never this sort of culture of pamphlets that was kind of very obvious. And yet, if you come in through the sort of writing world now, this is the gateway, isn't it? The pamphlet is the gateway arc, the sequence. I just wondered what you thought about that as a way in, where this sort of culture of the pamphlet has come from.
Well, I'm with you. I mean, it wasn't around really when I started out either. You were just looking to win the lottery. You're just looking to one of the big publishers to want you, And when I was trying to get published initially in the late 80s, that was a mug's game, because you had these two, you had Faber and you had Chatto and Windus, and they were immovable. They didn't take on anyone. I mean, notoriously Faber, this didn't take on anyone. It was just like dead. It was still, it was paralyzed. And it was actually Blood Axe that changed that more than anyone else. I mean, there was other people, Carcanet and so on. But Blood Axe, I thought Neil Astley of Blood Axe was really revolutionary, because he just picked up loads of people who were clearly promising, who Faber wouldn't take a punt on, and that's how I read the late 80s and early 90s. But pamphlets really just wasn't a thing. I don't remember when that became a thing. I guess in the 21st century. I don't think there's any issue with that at all, because often I'm working with, the poets I'm working with in the school, you sort of feel, you got the beginnings of a pamphlet here, and sometimes you got the beginnings of a book here. But it's really helpful in terms of the pedagogy at the school, because it's like, work towards this. You've got your voice is really developing. You've got a bunch of good poems, so get 20 of them together. You've got a pamphlet, and then beyond that, it's like get 50 of them, whatever. But no, I think the big company publishing is going to be horrible for years, maybe forever. I have no idea. I mean, it doesn't look good, but and it's not that easy for small presses either. But a lot of them are doing their best and flourishing, and some go under and some survive. And it's just often it's to do with how much fight they can put up, and it's to do with where they are, and how brutally economics have got. But I think pamphlets are great, and this is obviously a really good route into it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, we've got a couple of questions here. What was the most precious lesson that you learned from Derek Walcott?
I tell you what, he pushed for me. Well, I suppose the most precious were like, I always remember his face when he said, do you know Auden's work? And he knew I'd been to Oxford, and he expected me to know it. And I said, no, because I was a lazy fucker and I didn't know it at 23, which is not good, not impressive. And just he stared at me, and just he couldn't believe that I hadn't done that. At my point in life, I hadn't gone looking for that. So that was one thing. And another thing, we'd been going there about four or 5 weeks, and we got past the initial fear because he was charismatic, and we were told he had a temper and he could be unpleasant and so on. We'd been told all that, so it was a kind of legend of what he was like. But we felt, we'd done 4 or 5 weeks, and he liked us, and we'd be fine. And one week he said, go and read all about Edward Thomas. And the next week we show up, and he says, now tell me about Edward Thomas. And no one's done it. No one had done it because we got so complacent, and no one had done it. And he just told us to fuck off. Just said, go away. He said, I don't ask you to do much, just go away. So that was so chastening. And I don't do that stuff with my students because I don't have that sort of temperament. I wouldn't dare. But I thought, it matters what your old guy or your old woman says. We've been around. Do it. Listen. Yeah. It was very easy for me to be Derek's student because I was a Brit, and he was a Caribbean who had grown up very much, the remains of that sort of British imprint on St. Lucia, which was British half the time and French half the time as well. Whatever the wrongs and wrongs are of that's what he grew up in, that educational system. And that educational system was basically him on a big throne and everyone sitting on the floor. And he arrives in the American university system where everyone's sitting in a ring in chairs, and you know what I mean. There's no hierarchy, and Derek found that really difficult to deal with. But I kind of got it. Because I knew I'd sailed through Oxford being kind of lazy and just doing the things I could do well. So when I arrived with him, I thought, wow, he's really serious. He really knows things. So I'm prepared to sit on the floor with him. I don't mind if he's sitting on the throne. I'll sit on the floor because I know nothing. And the thing that used to crack him up, so much so that I thought his lungs would give out. He said he had an American student who said, Derek taught them the Fall of Rome, that sort of sublime Auden poem. And the guy said, I wouldn't have done it like that. And Derek never forgot that, and I just said, yeah, no. So that's what he was afraid of. He wanted that classroom hierarchy thing, and that's what he grew up with. That's what I grew up with. So it meant that I could I didn't mind being insulted by him, and I could give it back. Because I didn't believe we were on the same level, so I thought, I could be his fool. He could be King Lear, and I could be the fool. And that worked for us.
Teacher. Yeah.
Yep.
Another question we have here: as someone who has written across so many literary genres, are there any forms that have eluded you? What have you never mastered?
Ballet. I haven't written a. Oh no! What have I? What? I'm just thinking of things I've tried and think I couldn't do. No, I mean, I've just tried the things that I think I could have a shot at. I mean, I don't think I've written a great novel. I certainly, I don't know how to write a great novel. Drinks with Dead Poets is sort of a novel, but it's not really a novel. It's really a sort of like really class, a long surreal class. That's what Drinks with Dead Poets is. No, but I'm never going to write a novel. I've lost I've lost my capacity to believe fiction and to enjoy it lately. So I read a lot of psychology and philosophy, and I somehow misplaced my ability to believe fiction.
Which kind of leads into the last question. I think we've got one quick last question. Political poetry is difficult. Who do you think is the most accomplished political poet? I'm not sure if that's today or ever, but either I think is worth thinking about.
Well, I mean, you have to think of all those people who I can't read in the original, who wrote basically codes and cryptograms under Soviet Russia, and anyone who's doing that now anywhere, presumably there's an awful lot of that going on in the Middle East and has been for a long time. Just people who can't say it out loud, and they do it in code. You know, like Mandelstam was doing it in code until he stepped over the line and basically called Stalin twat and basically died because of it. We don't have anything where the stakes are so high. I'd be interested to see if any American poets know quite how close to the edge their country is. That would be interesting, instead of disappearing up themselves. I don't want to generalize. I mean, I think Auden is exemplary. I've been thinking about his Elegy for Freud, which I think is a fantastic poem. But it's difficult, because I think with political poetry, you think you're limiting yourself to a day and age, right? You think we all have this kind of engine inside us that says, let's write something that's forever. I think that would be a really good thing to want to do. But a political poem can be forever if it's good enough. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed.
So I'd like to just thank you, Glyn, so much for your time. It's been the most brilliant, wonderful hour of Glyn Maxwell. So thank you for your presence and for your sharing so honestly and generously. Thank you.